Okay. Let me try to say present. One moment.
Chris, do you have the slides?
I don't.
Okay, if Sister Ida, if you have difficulties in sharing the slide, maybe I can share. Do you think I should share or?
Because I'm multitasking. One moment. Do you see this? Anybody see this?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
I see.
Okay.
Yes, we can see. Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Chris, please go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you all for being there and joining us today. So Jeremy kind of reached out and he sends his apologies. He's having some definite computer issues right now that just started creeping up for him. But here in his stead, and I've been fortunate enough to go to IIUM several times when I was in Tokyo the first time, and I look forward to that day when I can visit the campus again. It's a beautiful campus and location. Right now, I'm going to be talking about the AOARD, Asian Office of Aerospace Research and Development, the grant process, kind of what we offer, how the grant process works, and then to kind of make it a little bit more confusing, I talk about how I do the grants, which is a little bit different than how Dr. Knopp does the grants, which is, you heard the voice of Dr. Rushing, one of our colleagues. He's on the line as well. He does a similar type of research area as Dr. Knopp, and his process is a little different than ours as well. So everybody has their own kind of little niches depending on who you work with. But again, my name is Chris Ahlers, and thanks for joining us. Next slide, please.
Sister Ida, next slide, please.
Sister Ida, next slide. Sister Ida.
Yes, yes. One
Next
moment.
slide.
One moment. One moment. I can't. Yeah, I can't get to my slides. It's one moment. One moment. Yes. One moment, please. Wait. Can't do this. I've lost. The screen sharing is paused. Can't. I've lost. Okay, my I need help actually. Can somebody assist?
Yes, what is it?
Because I don't know how to explain. All those things are down here. It's preventing me from getting to the slides. All these things.
Is it hang, Sister Ida?
All the controls are down here, so it's covering the folder. I'm not sure how to explain to you all.
Can you press escape first, escape button, then it will be minimized.
I'm not allowed to minimize because I'm the, how do you call it? I am the admin here, so I can't close this, minimize.
Either maybe you can stop sharing. Maybe others who have the slide can share.
Yeah. Maybe Sister Ida, you stop share. Let me try to share the slide.
I can't see it. One moment, please. I can see this. Participant resume share. Actually, I haven't been sharing. I stopped it already. Stop sharing. Okay. Now I'm off it.
Okay.
All right.
Let me share.
I can't minimize actually.
Can you share? Sorry, not this one.
Okay, now I can see your video.
Okay, can you see the slide now?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we can see. Thank you, Dr. Tanvir.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Dr. Please go ahead. This is the next slide.
All right, and then just a quick overview of what we'll be talking about. You can see it right there, and we'll just go through each one of those items briefly. All right, next slide. Just so you know, how I like to go relatively quickly through the actual kind of overview slides, if you will, and spend more time on the questions, because that's kind of where really each person kind of brings out, a little bit about their particular situation or subject area, and how our office can kind of match those needs. But just as you know, our office, AOARD, falls under, this is just the organizational standpoint, falls under the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, which you see there on the top row, AFOSR. And AFOSR itself is just one of a number of directorates under the umbrella of the Air Force Research Laboratory. As it's a little bit different though, is that but the other directorates in the Air Force Research Laboratory, their funding is primarily limited to application type funding, not basic science. Whereas AFOSR, we're the only directorate that kind of has exclusive rights on basic science funding. And we do have several different offices. There is the office that I'm calling you from, which is in Tokyo. We also have a London office and a Santiago office. And we also have at our main AFOSR headquarters in Arlington, Virginia, there's also a smaller component there that kind of supports the overseas offices. All right, next slide. Okay, I just talked about how AFOSR kind of has the cornerstone, if you will, of basic science research in AFRL. And that's because AFRL itself is a rather large organization, and its funding is really divided up into 3 different areas. There's what we call 6.1 funding, 6.2 funding, and then 6.3 funding. AFOSR and AOARD, we deal with vast majority, over 90% of the funds that we're processing in and out of our office is 6.1 funds, basic research. Once we get, once the project gets past that kind of initial stages, we've proven the first principles, we've kind of proven that the math works, that we've done 1 or 2 samples. We now want to take a technology and mature it up a little bit more to an applied program or even advanced demonstration program. then it becomes what we call 6.2 and 6.3 level science projects. And those are usually, those are handled at AFRL, at some of the larger US government labs. And also just kind of by the nature of it, also has more funding behind it, because it usually costs a bit more once you scale up a technology like that. But our office, AFOSR, AOARD, we're looking at 6.1 basic science research funding. All right, next slide, please. All right, AFOSR, as you can see there, that's a big chart of just all the different research departments that are under the umbrella of AFOSR. One of the questions I get when we used to travel to universities and such is, like my particular background is biophysics and mathematics. And I also do some behavioral science stuff just because I'm interested in it. And one thing, especially on the behavioral science piece, or even on the mathematics piece, I would get people and they would say, kind of what does my subject area have to do with the Air Force, or what does it have to do with planes and flying? And I would usually respond that you can look at this, look at this chart here and see that there's an awful lot of research areas that have really very little traditional to do with what you might think of, think of the Air Force, or think of just flying aircraft or spacecraft. There's a lot of different fields in there. So again, I would take it as just we're a basic science funding organization, and we really have a wide spectrum that we can fund across. Next slide. Again, this slide in particular is a bit outdated. It's looking at FY16 data, but you can see roughly 4 years ago, so we did 145 different projects were funded out of our office at a total of about 9.4 million US. Sorry, before we move on, we also have a couple other things down there. I'll talk about them more a little bit later on, and that's at the very bottom there. You see a window on science program, an excellent program. In my opinion, it's the very best thing we do, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Conference support, and those are two other things that we'll talk about in a bit. All right, next slide. All right, here's just another kind of look at kind of where all the grants are in that area. For AOARD, our area of responsibility goes from India to essentially New Zealand, and kind of everywhere in between. But we have grants. Myself, I've had grants in, I think, every country that's listed there on the map. So we try to do visits and coordinate with those as well. Australia is our largest country for grant recipients. There's a few reasons behind that, but they are our top producer of grants. When I first got to AFOSR in 2014, I think we'd only had about 2 or 3 grants in Malaysia, so not a lot. And then I believe just in FY21, IIUM alone, I think, came away with 6 or 7 grants. So, a definite increase in activity in Malaysia, and so that's pretty cool. I think there's a lot of good value that comes from the Malaysian universities that we've been to, and IIUM is, of course, a big part of that. All right, next slide. Here's kind of an idea. This was an AOARD IPO, International Program Officer, who put this slide together several years ago. But he's talking about kind of the way that we envision ourselves working. I told you that the Windows on Science program was the program that I think is the best program we have, more so than the grants. And here's why I say that. Because our idea, our whole purpose of being out here is to try and kind of locate people who are doing really unique, really interesting science that maybe we don't have a counterpart to in the States who's doing that same kind of work. And so we look and try to leverage that work that's going on out, out in Asia with partnerships and with research collaborations back in the U.S. And that doesn't mean, and I might be alone in this, but that doesn't mean just partnerships with the Air Force. I mean, just partnerships with research collaborators in general, with whether it's with the Air Force Research Lab, the Army Research Lab, the Navy Research Lab, or it's not even with the Department of Defense Research Lab. Maybe it's with University of Texas, Missouri State, University of Washington, you name it. Our whole purpose is kind of is just to try and build international collaborations with researchers over in Asia, with researchers in the US. One of the ways we do that is by grants. We'll try to give typically 1-year grants, sometimes 2-year grants, and try to get you connected with some researchers in the US, usually in this case with the Air Force Research Lab, but then connections can be made elsewhere outside of that. There's also a program called the Windows on Science, which our office uses heavily, and which is just part of my process when I'm giving a grant to somebody. The Window on Science is where we'll actually pay for you to go visit a lab in the States and to give a briefing on your talk, and then meets other PIs who are interested in your work, and then hopefully that can build some collaborations in that way. Once we get that awareness, we make that initial engagement of the WAS, of the grant, and the idea is that hopefully a long-term research relationship can develop out of that, where we can do joint publications, shared research facilities, co-hosting, co-chairing, program reviews, that sort of thing. So, all right, next slide, please. All right, how do we do this? How do we try to make that happen with what we just talked about? And that is through our research, our mission tools. Site visits and conference attendance, that was great a year and a half ago. Hasn't really happened at all in the last year and a half. So it's been replaced by Zoom. I think we've all have learned the strengths of telework, and have also learned the negatives of telework and what it's good at and what it's not good at. Where I value this type of format, I don't think this is ever going to replace actually going to IIUM, seeing each of you, seeing your labs, maybe even look at the classrooms a bit. So I will definitely long for that day to get going again. The research grants, which I think is what probably have a lot of questions about, what people want to talk about, and this is where we again fund 1 to 2 year grants. Each of our program officers is a little bit different in the sense that I usually only will fund a PI one time. So I'll do one grant for one person, one time, 1 or 2 years. And that's because my whole point is I just want to get you in the door. It's to get you in the door so you can go to those program reviews, start making the connections, and then it's really up to you as the researcher who you're going to make connections with, how you're going to kind of grow your programs. I just want to get you started. Conference support, again, something that we used to do relatively frequently a year and a half ago, not so much since, but that's usually about anywhere from a couple $100 up to about $3,000 to maybe $5,000 on occasion. We've been able to get that approved, where if you're hosting a workshop or a conference, we will we'll be able to provide some support to do that. Not fund the entire thing, but we can provide a nominal level of support for it. And then the program I like a lot, the Window on Science travel support program, where once we get to the Q&A, I'll probably talk about how I run a grant application process. And part of that, I'll talk about the Window on Science, where again, our office, AOARD, will send you to the States. And it actually doesn't have to be to the States. Sometimes it's just to a conference somewhere else. I think the last WAS I did, I sent someone to Switzerland for a conference. And then you will it's usually to give a talk, to meet other researchers, to really, build the collaborations. And hopefully further your work. Next slide, please. All right, a couple things that one of the biggest questions we get asked, and I think it's a very appropriate question, and that's why we put a slide in here now for it. That's intellectual property. There are two things I want to point out with intellectual property. One, every bit of intellectual property that you develop as part of this grant, if it's a patent associated with it, any intellectual property that is your sole, I guess, in research accomplishment of the grant, that stays with you and the university. The US government has no right over it whatsoever. What we do have with the grants is if you were to, let's say you were to develop an algorithm, and that algorithm produced a table of data, the US government would reserve the right to use the data in that table as funding that work. However, the algorithm that you developed to create that data, we would have no rights, ownership, title to whatsoever. So that's just, I'll make sure there's the difference there of data versus the actual intellectual property created to develop the data. So we would have access, we would expect access to the data, not to the algorithms that created the data. I think one thing I've really, from the very first day I started in Tokyo, like I said, 2014 now, was that how serious the program officers and the admin staff here really take that intellectual property piece. We understand how important that is. We understand that as researchers, right, IP is really your currency. It's how you go ahead and publish, get promotions, that sort of thing. So with IP, I'm sorry, I think there's an open mic on as well.
He has submitted the thesis, I think, 1 month ago, but we didn't
Please turn off the mic, please. Others.
All right. So
is there any way we can expedite this, make it faster somehow? Because the reason is
Dr. Tanvi, you are the you can mute Dr. Ali.
Let me see.
It's not because otherwise he has to go back to his country, Somalia, and then yeah.
all right,
Welcome, Dr. Jeremy Knopp. You're here. You made it.
Yes, I am. I created a new Zoom account and I was able to join.
Thank you.
all right. We ready to keep going on the next one?
Okay, another thing then.
All right, so we just go to the next slide, please. And
how fast we can have, let's say we settle this by 1 week. Then,
Dr. Tanvi, please mute Dr. Ali.
I'm trying. Just 1 minute.
No, whatever.
all right.
Just
So to send it off, I want to talk about just what I do when I'm requesting a grant, or how I go through the grant process. After a meeting like this, how I would typically do it is and actually how I do it in this COVID environment as well, is I would ask for an idea paragraph, right? And that's just simply you sending myself, again, I'm doing biophysics and mathematics. If you were working in those areas and you had an idea for that work, I would absolutely want you to send me some ideas that you had. I asked for just a paragraph to start off with. Everybody is, again, a little bit different. This is where I said where everybody has their own little different way they do it. My way is to simply request the idea paragraph, just a couple sentences, usually what you're trying to do, how you're trying to do it, what's the hypothesis you're trying to get at, and just tell me a little bit, really quickly, just about what the basic science is that you're looking to do. Hopefully it doesn't take too much time. That way we can look at it and see if there's, this fits into the area or it doesn't. If it does, typically in this case, what I'll then do is I will ask you to attend a program officer's program review in Arlington. And since these are virtual right now, that's just becomes a virtual program review. And then you can kind of get an idea of the other research projects that are going on in that area. And then from there, you and I would work together, and we would then kind of craft what type of idea would we want to move forward with, or would you want to move forward with as the researcher? And at that point, I would ask you to put together a white paper. And then from there, we then move to the actual proposal submission stage in grants.gov. It's one thing that I really like about the process of an AOARD grant is that it's not like a lot of grant submission processes. It's not a black box, right? You're not going to go to a website, upload a bunch of documents, hit submit, and then not hear anything for 4 to 6 months, right? It's very collaborative. You will go back and forth quite a few times. We don't ever want to direct or shape your research. We want it to be your research, but we also, we make that time commitment as well, that we want to make sure that if we're going to try and get you a grant, that we can make it the most successful one as possible. So there is that back and forth that we'll kind of go and be like, hey, can you add this to your white paper and your proposal? Can you mention this? That type of thing. So it's not it's a collaborative process. You're not going to be just asked for a bunch of paperwork and then forgotten about. All right. Next slide. And there's a little bit about the conference support. Again, doesn't pay for the entire conference, but it does provide some support if you need different aspects. The one thing I will mention is that food is difficult for us, just for their different contracting and financial type of policies that we have. However, when it comes to procuring the venue, audiovisual support equipment, printing, those are things we can do with it. Like I'm sure Tanvir can probably, since he's gotten an AOARD grant, can probably share some stories of some of our government bureaucracies with him. But we are AOARD, we are a government, U.S. government entity, agency, and so we have all the bureaucracy that goes associated with that. Just to give you one little story on conference support, I tried to get a conference support package done for just about $1,000 for rental chairs, and that ended up being an incredibly difficult thing because those rental chairs could be used to be sit on while people were eating food, and food is a very difficult thing to get through. And so we just changed it to printing support, and then it went through with no problem. So those same kind of nuances exist, and sometimes just have to be worked through creatively. Next slide. All right, here's where, like I said, now I like to just kind of open it up and hear your questions, hear your answers. We'll try to answer them as best we can. Actually, Dr. Knopp is on the line now. So again, I know Tanvir has worked with him mostly, and he's probably in that science area a bit more, but we got Dr. Rushing as well. All three of us are here to answer your questions and kind of talk about the different programs that we have for you.
Yeah, let me just say a few words. First of all, unfortunately, Dr. Rushing just had to leave. But to be honest with you, you were probably better off getting the introduction from Chris. He does an excellent job. I think he's the first one that engaged with your university, so he has some historical perspective. He's the one that introduced most of you to me. So really excited to finally get on the line, and thank you so much, Chris, for being there to run this when I was unable to get connected. But yes, I'm here for questions. Chris is here for questions, whatever we can do.
So I'd like to invite now for any possible Q&A regarding the grant. So maybe you can ask questions. Anyone can unmute their mic and can ask questions, please. Any questions? Okay, the chat box, let me see.
Hi, Dr. Tanvir.
Yes, yes.
Chris and Jeremy, thank you so much for the presentation. I just want to ask about is there any deadline or do you have any timeline for this? How long it process for the proposal? Then how long I can get the grant? Thank you.
It's a really excellent question. And my approach is simply, I am on your timeline. I know what our fiscal year looks like at AOARD, but the way the budget is passed, there's uncertainty when the budget's actually passed, and then there's additional uncertainty when we receive the money. Then there's also additional uncertainty between the time we start the process and actually receive a proposal in grants.gov. There's so much uncertainty that I would rather work on your timeline when you have the ideas, when you feel comfortable submitting. And, you know, in our internal processes, we can easily fluctuate between fiscal years. So it should be transparent to you. And I would not be too concerned about the timing. The BAA is actually open for that reason. There are no deadlines. The BAA is updated maybe once every 2 or 3 years. And I sent a link to Tanvir with the new BAA, which because the BAA in this presentation is obsolete. But no, it's open. You can submit anytime. For the other question about how long does it take? It takes a while. I would actually be curious how long it takes in Malaysia's government system for comparison, but in my mind, it does take a long time, and maybe Tanvir, since he has experience, can give you his story. But I would say less than a year, but more than 6 months.
All right, thank you very much, Jeremy.
Yeah, it takes, for me, it takes about 8 to 10 months, something like that, to finally get the approval of the grant from Dr. Kristopher. Yeah. But Dr. Knopp was my person in charge who handles the grant for me.
All right, thanks.
Any other question?
Hi everyone. I'm not really a question. Hi Jeremy, hi Chris, nice to see you guys again. Just wanted to say hello and just some input. I think, yeah, Dr. Tanvir's timeline is about the same for all of us who has gotten the grant before, or maybe I think I was under Chris, and whether it's approved or not is a bit slightly more faster, just that the documentation, the process of transferring the money and etc., it will take some time. Right, Chris?
Yeah, that's about about right. It just takes some time, and unfortunately, sometimes the more complex grants as well will take a little bit more time. Yeah. And you never know what we're gonna. I mean, this is great, great honest that you're on, because I just sent you a note not too long ago. So if you could look at your email and respond back to me on we had one of your questions about one of your grants, about one of the equipment purchases in your grant. But it's one of those things where Honest's grant was not terribly complicated, but it just, you never know what questions that we're going to come back with. And once it leaves the technical side where Jeremy and I kind of have some influence in it, once it leaves that and goes to the contracting and financial side, then we have very little kind of visibility into how long that process or what questions that are then going to arise. and so sometimes sometimes they can fly through in a couple months, which are very rare. But as Dr. Knopp said, it definitely tries to be under that year. So I think it's a good 8 to 10 months, like he said, is a great timeline to go with.
Yep, Chris, yes, I will reply your email. Suddenly there's too many things at the same time, but
no worries.
I'll get back to you definitely by today.
Fumiko-san bugged me about it again today, and so when I saw your name pop up there, I thought,
all right, I will, don't worry.
Good afternoon, Dr. Chris, Dr. Jeremy. My name is Ahmad. Is there any specific capping for the funding, or if you can share the recommended quantum to be requested, if you can share? Thank you.
I'll take that one because I just had a question from somebody in Malaysia or about a Malaysian grant. It should be very much in the spirit of what you would receive from your own Malaysian government agencies. So if we can point to the average grant amounts for your type of research with our Malaysian government counterparts, that's a good rule of thumb to go by. So I wouldn't say there's any upper limit per se, but something that you can trace back to, this is reasonable given the scope of the proposed research as it would be in Malaysia.
Any other question?
Hi, hello.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hanafi just writing.
Okay. Hi, I'm Hanafi. I'm from mechanical. Recently, actually, I have signed the final step to get the grant, which is the security part. So all this while, I've been talking to Dr. Ryan. So may I know each grant, who should I refer? Only Dr. Ryan, or can I go to Dr. Jeremy? Because I want to know the process, because it has been a while since March.
You know, I didn't think of it. I should have invited Ryan to join us because I forgot he does have a grant going to your university. Ryan, I believe, has been on annual leave periodically through the summer. And so he may have been a little delayed in getting back to you, but he's very conscientious. And I'm sure if you just give him a polite email reminder, he will get back with you.
Oh, I see. So he's on leave. Okay. All right. Sure.
I don't know if he's on leave now, but he has been on and off this summer.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
But I think that also kind of goes to the aspects too, though, of you can get all your documents in, you can submit all your, all your paperwork, and and Ryan and Jeremy and I can do that piece that we need to do. Since each of our technical areas is a little bit different, it has some different kind of hurdles that it goes through. Okay. But once that gets that approval, I don't want to say it's random, but it could. We really just don't have a great visibility on. There's no real queue of grants that then get worked on by our finance and accounting. There's different. There could be different outside influences that might prioritize some grants over other grants, and so then they get jumped to the front. So I would just say the things you can control, make sure you take care of that, which is getting those documents in, engaging with Ryan, because as Jeremy said, Ryan is very conscientious. He's very good. He'll make sure that your grant is getting squared away as good as can be. And then if he says you're good, I would just go with that, and then just and the process will get to you when it gets to you. And unfortunately, I know it's not a great answer. It's the answer I've been given for a lot of years, and but I don't know a better one that doesn't give false hope when really I don't have any visibility once it leaves our technical areas.
Dr. Kaiser, you had a question, I suppose.
Yeah, Dr. Tanvir.
Yes.
Just wondering, I think the same question as Prof. Fazil just now, because when we do the proposal and then do the ideas and then, prepare all the things, and then do we need to mention about the amount of the funding that we're going to propose, or just, just wondering about that, how much the cap, You understand my question is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe Dr. Jeremy would like to answer. I think he already has answered that there is no such cap, but it has to be some reasonable amount, similar to what Malaysian government agency allocates, right, Dr. Jeremy? Or maybe you would like to add something.
Yeah. I mean, just look at it as you're writing a grant proposal to your, Ministry of Education or other funding agency in Malaysia. What amounts about would be reasonable from their standpoint, and that would be the best rule of thumb.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Any other question from anyone?
I guess I'll add one comment that the amount of money that you propose in the white paper, it's not that critical, because eventually when you go through the grants.gov process, you'll be itemizing, the salary expenses, the equipment expenses, and our staff, our PK staff, like Fumiko, will be asking questions like, what's, this piece of equipment is expensive. Is there a quote for it, for example? So the exact numbers will come out through the process, mainly in the proposal process. So for the white page, just take a best guess at what's reasonable and what you estimate.
Exactly. Same happened to me as well. I mean, white paper is just a rough estimation, but when you go into actual submission to the online system, you have to give a kind of detail out with the quotation on all the some justification of this amount, what you would like to ask for.
And I just want to put in too, this is the part when I was talking about it's a collaborative process, right? Don't feel like you have to set one amount and then it's, you go low because you think that might increase your odds, or you're afraid of asking for too much. Put the amount that you think is necessary to do the work that you want to do, and then let the program officer that you're working with kind of go back and forth with you and let that amount kind of come out in the wash, if you will. It'll sort itself out. Don't kind of get yourself psyched up or psyched out one way or the other with it, because again, these are collaborative processes. It's not you have one shot to submit and you better get it right. We'll work with you. So
what is the expectation of the completion to complete? Is it within 2 years or 3 years? It depends on the project or depend on us, Chris?
It depends on the project.
Right.
Like I said, we're each different. I tend to traditionally do 1 to 2 year grants one time for. I'd like to do 2 years. I like to give I like to give 1 grant to a PI for 2 years. And then at that time, that's 2 years where that PI can then be trying to network, meet other researchers. Right. The U.S. build those collaborations. There's been it's funny I say that, and I think IIUM now has the school that I have the most repeat grantees to, but that's been some unusual circumstances that have created that. One of which was COVID, right? When you guys weren't able to get into your labs and have access to your tools, I'm not going to hold that against. I'm not going to say, all right, no, that was our one shot for a grant. Now we're going to move on, right? I'm gonna, we fixed that situation. So everybody's a little bit different, but I tend to do personally. I tend to do a 2 year grant one time for a PI, And then whether the grant is hugely successful or not successful, kind of, I don't sound cold, but it doesn't, I think it's great if it's successful, and I want that PI to be very successful. But then I also have a limited budget, and I need to go and give other people the same opportunities.
Yeah, I do want to say, like, when we're reviewed by our management, we're constantly asked, how many new PIs do you have? And so what Chris just mentioned is his approach is to give 1 2-year grant. And if it's successful, that's great. The successful grant will open new doors with new collaborators, new funding agencies. Wonderful. But we're definitely inclined to reach out to people who have never worked with us before for coverage. That is definitely something that our management looks at is, are we really talking to new people, or are we just supporting what's convenient for us? So yeah, I guess that's another twist that I should add on that.
All right, thanks. Great. Chris and Jeremy. All right, thanks.
Any other question from the audience?
I'll just make a final remark. Thank you, Tanvir, for setting this up. I think we were due for another broad telecon with IIUM, and it's really great to see so much interest. I'm really delighted by that. Again, I apologize to everyone. I couldn't get connected. I'm very thankful to Chris for making the presentation for me, and I have no doubt he did a better job than I probably would have. So thank you very much for setting it up.
Thank you, Dr. Jeremy Knopp and Dr. Chris, for your participation in the presentation. The information was quite useful, and it will be, I hope many of our colleagues will be encouraged to apply for this grant. And as you can see, already the number of applicants and grant recipients has increased in IIUM, as Dr. Chris already has mentioned. So I hope it will further enhance this number of applications from IIUM. So if is there any other questions? Final round, I'm asking. Feel free to ask. It seems like no more question. So thank you very much for your time, Dr. Chris and Dr. Jeremy Knopp. And yeah, that's all from my side. Anything you would like to say?
All right. Thank you guys very much for showing up. I appreciate it. And I really look forward to being able to go out there and visit the campus again.
Yes, sure. When this pandemic overs, inshallah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
With that, we end our today's session, and we will meet again, inshallah. And hopefully next time it will be a physical meeting, not an online meeting, inshallah. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Chris and Dr. Jeremy Knopp.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
And Dr. Tanvir for hosting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Hamid.
Thank you, Prof. Amir, for attending. Yeah. Our new director of RNC, everyone, if you know.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum, Prof. Amir.
Thank you. Thank you.